He said one sentence and the room erupted. "My grandpa is a legend," the boy whispered. His voice wasn't loud. He never spoke loudly, but the words landed heavy enough to make the class pause for a heartbeat before the laughter came. It wasn't the children who broke first. It was the teacher. Mr. Daly had the kind of laugh that cut through drywall, dry and sharp, like something forced out of his throat by habit more than humor. He doubled over, slapping his desk, loud enough that kids from the hall stopped and peeked in through the glass window of the door. The boy sat stiff in his chair, jaw tight, knuckles pale against the wood grain. "Legend?" Daly wheezed, wiping a finger across the corner of his eye. "And who would that be? Some cowboy off the television?" He stretched the words, savoring them, rolling the sarcasm so every child could taste it. The class howled. Some leaned over their desks, pointing. Others slapped each other on the shoulders as if the boy himself had written the punchline. But not all of them laughed. A few kept quiet, eyes darting between the teacher and the boy, uncomfortable in their own skin. They knew what it was to sit at the center of the storm, to feel the crowd decide what you are. The boy stayed still. His name was Eli, though nobody in the room seemed to remember it right then. His face flushed crimson, but he didn't look down. He fixed his eyes on the back corner of the blackboard, the chalk dust drifting there like tired snow. Mr. Daly leaned on the edge of his desk, enjoying the silence that followed the laughter. "Listen, children," he said, his voice heavy with mock sympathy. "We should all have dreams, yes? We should all imagine that the people in our lives are bigger than they are. That's healthy. But legends? Legends don't show up in little towns like this." That brought another ripple of chuckles, lower this time, but still sharp enough to sting. Eli clenched his fists under the desk. His fingernails pressed crescents into his palms. He could feel the eyes of the girl beside him, Jenny Parks, flicking toward him with something like pity. He hated that most of all. The pity. Better the laughter. Better the pointing. Pity meant they saw him cracked open, smaller than they were. The clock ticked above the whiteboard. A faint smell of cut grass blew in through the cracked window. The groundskeeper was mowing early, and every few seconds the blades spat stones that pinged against the building's brick wall. Life outside was steady, indifferent. Inside, the air hung heavy. Daly let the moment breathe, then pushed harder. "A legend," he repeated, leaning forward on the word. "What kind of legend wears boots with holes in them? What kind of legend doesn't even drive the boy to school?" The laughter rose again, though thinner now. Even the cruelest of the kids were beginning to sense the edge dulling, the risk of it turning. But Daly didn't notice, or didn't care. He kept smiling down at Eli like a man convinced he was sculpting discipline out of mockery. Eli swallowed hard. His throat was dry, but he forced himself to meet Daly's gaze. For a second, just 1 second, the teacher hesitated. Maybe it was the steadiness in the boy's eyes, the absence of tears where he'd expected them. Maybe it was something older, something Daly recognized but couldn't admit. Then he smirked again, waved his hand as though brushing dust from his sleeve, and turned back to the board. "Now, let's get back to history. Where were we? Ah, yes, myths of the frontier. Real myths, not playground ones." The chalk squealed as he wrote. The sound scratched through the room. Eli stared at the letters as they formed, white and harsh against green, and thought about the word he'd used. Legend. He thought about his grandfather's face, the deep lines carved by sun and years, the steady way he moved even when nothing asked him to. He thought about the stories whispered in diners, the half-smiles on strangers when they recognized the name but didn't say it out loud. And for the first time that day, he let the corner of his mouth twitch upward. Just a fraction. Enough to steady himself. Behind him, the room hadn't gone back to normal. The giggles had thinned into whispers, some cruel, some curious. Jenny still looked at him, eyebrows furrowed, lips pressed tight like she was holding back words she couldn't say in public. Two boys in the back row, taller, older, exchanged glances that promised more after the bell. The clock ticked again. Eli unclenched his fists and flexed his fingers under the desk, the half-moon still etched into his skin. The sting grounded him. He would remember that sting. He would remember every laugh, because humiliation doesn't vanish when the bell rings. It lingers, and sometimes it asks to be answered. Just wondering, where are you watching from? Write it down, bellow. The bell rang, chairs scraped, and backpacks thumped shut. Eli stayed seated, sliding his notebook into his bag with slow precision. Quiet couldn't protect him, but it gave him time. "Hey, legend," Cruz drawled, blocking the doorway with his arm. His friend hovered behind him, grinning, acne scars sharp in the fluorescent light. "Where's Grandpa? Shouldn't he be here in a white horse carriage?" The hallway buzzed with locker doors and sneakers. Eli tried to pass, but Cruz shifted, shoulder wide, matching him. "Maybe he's filming," the tall one added, flicking Eli's ear just hard enough to sting. Jenny, 3 lockers down, said softly, "Knock it off." Nobody answered. Her words died in the current. Mr. Daly appeared with a stack of worksheets, voice smooth. "Gentlemen, move along." "No need to be cruel." Then, looking at Eli, "We all have fantasies. Perfectly normal at your age." His tone wore false sympathy like a mask. A few kids laughed. Eli felt heat rise in his ears. He didn't lower his eyes. "He's real," he said quietly. The words landed with no weight. Daly smiled thinly. "Of course." He turned back into his classroom. By lunchtime, the story had mutated. He said his granddad's a star. No, a fighter. No, some TV cowboy. The cafeteria hummed with half-belief, half-mockery. Eli ate alone until Jenny slid across from him. "You don't owe them anything," she said. "I'm not doing it for them." His voice was so low she leaned forward to hear. When the last class began, the pressure had built. Daly leaned on his desk, eyes on the room. "Heroes," he said. "We mythologize them because we crave stories. But myths aren't facts." He didn't need to name Eli. The class turned their heads for him. The final bell rang. As kids packed, Daly raised his hand. "Before you go, Friday's assembly. Guests from the county. Real public servants. And Eli, if your grandfather is so legendary, perhaps he should come." I'd be glad to shake his hand. The smirk in his voice lit sparks. Someone whispered, "He won't." Another, "Bet he will." The hallway crowd pressed closer, eager for the dare. Eli swallowed, his throat dry. He counted to 5 like his grandpa had taught him when anger burned too hot. Then he said, "Clear enough for the whole class. He'll come." Daly's smile flickered. "Will he now? We'll keep a chair ready." The laughter that followed was thinner than earlier, but it was enough. After school, the late sun cast gold across the linoleum. Eli walked past the office, past the moms in scrubs, waiting to sign their kids out, and out to the side lot where the old payphone stood. The receiver was sticky, the cord coiled like a snake. He dropped 2 quarters, dialed the number he knew by heart. It rang 3 times. Then a voice, calm and low. "Yeah, it's me," Eli said. "They asked for you." Tomorrow, silence stretched. Then, "You sure?" The question wasn't about timing, it was about cost. Eli saw his reflection in the scratched metal of the phone. Small frame, stubborn jaw. "I'm sure." A pause, then, "All right, I'll see what the road says." The line clicked. Eli hung up, slipping the useless paper receipt into his pocket like evidence. Back at the steps, Cruz and his friend lounged, waiting. "So? You invite the ghost?" "You'll see," Eli said, brushing past. Jenny was by the lockers, chin lifted. She didn't ask. She only said, Front row. I'll save you a seat. Eli nodded. Overnight was a long time in a town this size. Long enough for whispers to harden into bets. Long enough for a man to decide whether to appear. And when the doors opened tomorrow, everyone would learn whose bluff had been called. Morning light cut the classroom into stripes. The floor smelled of wax and chalk dust. Eli sat early, writing the date with careful strokes. Around him the room filled in with the hum of whispers, half challenge, half expectation. Cruz slouched in the back, smirking at nothing. Jenny slid into the front row and caught Eli's eye for a second. The chair beside her stayed empty, as if held for someone. Mr. Daly arrived with a box of photocopies, cheerful in that tight way he wore when he thought he had control. "Today," he began, "we'll talk about how communities build legends, what's exaggerated, what's forgotten." He spread the papers across his desk like evidence. The door opened, not loud, just a latch turning, a door swinging slow. The sound sliced through every whisper. Desks squeaked as bodies shifted. A man stepped in, plain denim shirt, rolled sleeves, jeans worn pale at the knees. Boots dusted from long roads, not tall, not theatrical. He carried no smile, just steady eyes. He removed a faded cap and held it in one hand. "I'm looking for Eli," he said. Nobody answered. Someone whispered his name anyway, and the ripple spread. Chuck. The room seemed to shrink around him. Eli's shoulders eased, his hands unclenching, for the first time that morning. Daly forced a chuckle. "And you are?" His eyebrows lifted, the signal he always used when he wanted the class to laugh with him. The man looked at him calmly. "I'm his grandfather." The room froze. Kids leaned forward, wide-eyed. Even Cruz, usually first to heckle, said nothing. Daly adjusted, smiling like it hurt. "Well then, perfect timing. We're talking about legends today. Perhaps you'd share a few words?" Chuck glanced at Eli first, a small tilt of the chin. "You good?" The boy's answer was in the looseness of his shoulders. Then Chuck turned back to Daly. "Words are fine, but they're not proof." He tapped the teacher's stack of handouts gently. "No offense." Daly spread his hands. "None taken. But here we value evidence. Demonstration over declaration." He pivoted to the class, riding the current of his authority. "Wouldn't you all agree?" A murmur ran through the desks. Jenny raised her hand, voice steady. "Why come at all? People already talk." Chuck's eyes softened. "They do, but sometimes they forget to listen." Boy asked. "That's enough." The words hung there, dangerous in their simplicity. Daly cut in quickly. "A fine sentiment. But this is a school. Perhaps you'd show us something educational?" He made a vague gesture, mimicking a stance he'd seen on TV. The tension shifted from whispers to a charged stillness. Eli's pencil rolled off his desk and clattered on the tile. The sound hit like a gavel. Chuck stepped toward the open patch of floor between the bookshelf and the flagstand. He placed Eli's pencil back on the desk without looking, then lifted his empty palms. "Education's simple," he said. "It's not tricks. It's respect." He let his eyes rest on Daly. "And you don't touch the kids." The teacher flushed, clearing his throat. "Obviously, no contact." Then, puffing himself taller, "Perhaps on me, then." "I'm sturdy enough," Cruz whispered. "Oh, man," barely audible. Desks creaked as everyone leaned in. Chuck studied the room first. The map crooked on the wall, the taped exit plan, the crooked blinds. Then he looked back at Daly. "You sure?" His voice was quiet, but the weight in it landed on everyone. Daly forced his smile wider. "By all means." Silence pressed down, the hum of the light suddenly loud. Eli's heel tapped once against his chair leg. Jenny's fingers whitened as she gripped her desk. Chuck took a slow step forward. Then another. He didn't square up like a fighter, he just arrived. The air seemed to tilt toward him. For the first time, Daly's laugh didn't come. His smile thinned, his voice lower, stripped of show. "All right, show me." The class leaned forward in one motion, every breath caught in the same second. And when Chuck shifted his weight, it was the smallest thing, and the whole room forgot how to breathe. Mr. Daly tried to laugh the room back into order. It came out thin, the kind of laugh that folds in the middle. "All right," he said, palms up, as if calming a skittish animal. "Mr. Norris, this isn't a sound stage. It's a school." His voice went bright on school, like brightness could disinfect fear. No one bought it. The room had already changed shape. The desks weren't furniture anymore. They were bleachers. The aisles turned into aisles of an arena. Even the posters, "Work hard, be kind," looked like banners hung for a match the building never expected to host. A low murmur rolled under the ceiling tiles, the first rumble before rain. Jenny's whisper reached Eli without turning heads. "He's here," she said, a small astonished smile in it. "Your grandpa actually came." Cruz leaned forward on his elbows and grinned like a heckler with a front-row ticket. Phones appeared and hovered, not high, just above desk level, the height of deniability. Chuck didn't step into any of it. He stood where the open patch of floor gave him breath and let the noise sort itself. His voice, when it came, didn't rise. "Sometimes the biggest mistake," he said, eyes on Daly, "is laughing at what you don't understand." The sentence landed without a thud. No theatrics, no underline, and somehow that made it heavier. The hush that followed wasn't reverent. It was calculating. The class had heard 1,000 adult speeches. This wasn't one. It sounded like a warning issued at room temperature. Daly's smile held, but his fingers fussed with the edge of a worksheet until the paper curled into a little wave. He pushed away from his desk as if he were walking onto a stage he owned. "With respect," he said, moving closer than he needed to, "my job is to keep fancy stories outside the lesson." He shooed the gathered energy with a sweep of the hand. "We have rules here." Structure Chuck's eyes flicked once to Eli, then back. "Good," he said. "Then we're on the same page." The back row tittered. A boy coughed too loudly and then hid behind his sleeve. Somebody's chair squeaked into silence. The fluorescent lights hummed as if they too were waiting for a cue. Daly, sensing the floor tilting beneath him, filled it with motion. He widened his stance. He talked with his hands, carving big shapes in the air like a coach, diagramming a play no one would run. "Children," he said, voice warming, "remember what we discussed. Legends are ideas we build. People build them. We should be careful not to confuse performance with power." He let that hang and watched the kids nod, grateful for something to agree with. Then he turned to Chuck with the benevolent condescension he reserved for substitute teachers and parents who asked too many questions at conferences. "You understand. We're not cynics. We're educators." "Then teach," Chuck said. No bite, no bow. Just 2 words that took the air out of Daly's balloon and set it gently on the floor. Daly kept moving because stopping would mean feeling. He paced close enough that Chuck could smell his aftershave and the coffee he'd burned by leaving it on the warmer too long. He made a show of loosening his shoulders, as if the room needed reassurance that he, not the moment, controlled his body. "Children love demonstrations," he announced, audience capturing again. "Visual learners, all of you." A couple of phones rose a notch. The hum lifted with them. Eli pressed his knees together to keep them from shaking and felt the edge of the desk against his thigh. He had imagined his grandfather's arrival 100 ways, but not this. This quiet that pressed like a hand. "Mr. Norris," Daly continued, "you may find that what works on camera doesn't translate to—" Chuck didn't move. He wasn't doing anything you could point to and say there. He just occupied his space so completely that movement felt redundant. The stillness worked on the room like a solvent. Cruz's grin faltered by a millimeter. Even the boys who had bullied Eli for sport shrank an inch back into their seats without knowing why. Theoretically, nothing had happened. Practically, something had shifted, and the body knows before the brain admits it. Daly heard it too, the smallness of his own voice when he filled the silence. He stepped one pace closer and overcompensated, spreading his arms as if to herd the class into a safety they didn't want. "Let's not be dramatic," he said, and there was the betrayal. The tremor he couldn't bury under diction. "We're having a civil demonstration, not a—" He searched for a word, came up empty, and smiled wider to hide it. "Not a spectacle." No one laughed. The ceiling vent clicked. A dust mote drifted through a shaft of light, and everyone watched it like a coin in the air. Eli heard his heartbeat in his ears. If you asked him later what frightened him in that moment, it wasn't the idea of a fight. It was the feeling that the room might split, that adult authority might peel away like old paint, and nobody would know what to do with the wood underneath. "Sir," Jenny said suddenly, her voice steady because someone's had to be, "We're listening." Daly nodded too fast. "Yes, listening." Of course he turned to Chuck, swallowing the reflexive lecture. "If you insist on illustrating, let's be clear. No contact with students. No theatrics." Chuck nodded once, slow. "No contact with the kids," he said, and the emphasis made the rule sound less like compliance and more like a line drawn in chalk. Daly seemed to grow on the permission. He squared his shoulders and walked into the open floor until he stood a yard from Chuck. It felt like less. His hands rose, half demonstration, half posture. "Everyone can see?" he called without turning. The class leaned as one block. "Good," Cruz whispered. "This is it." And the phone cameras tilted to find a better angle. Chuck's expression didn't change. The quiet around him got brighter somehow. He spoke softly, not to the room, but to the teacher in front of him. "You sure you want to do this here?" Daly blinked. Pride answered for him. "I'm sure." The fluorescent hum settled into a single note. Eli's sneaker heel tapped once and stilled. Across the room, the American flag made a dry cloth sound against its pole. Outside the window, the weather held its breath. Daly lifted his hands a hair higher, elbows out, like a man smoothing a sheet. He swung one palm in a broad, meaningless arc to keep his nerves moving, then froze it into a pose that read as authority. Chuck didn't mirror him. He didn't present a countershape. He only looked at Daly's hands and then at his feet, as if reading a sentence ordinary eyes couldn't see. The teacher tried one more joke, voice breaking on the last word. "Don't try this at home, kids." Nothing. The line fell and didn't bounce. The silence grew teeth. It bit the room gently and held it there. In the front row, Jenny's fingers interlaced so tight the knuckles had gone blanched. Cruz's smile had thinned into a straight line he would deny later. The phones didn't quiver now. Their owners had forgotten they were holding them. Chuck breathed once. "All right," he said. Daly stepped closer. The move too big for the space, and for the first time all morning he looked exactly what he was. A man walking deeper into something he couldn't name. His authority had always been volume and audience. Here, both had turned on him. He reached out, not to grab, not yet, but to claim the air between them. The room leaned with him. And the moment before contact, that thin electric slice held so long and tight that several kids realized their chests hurt from not breathing. Then Daly's hand kept going. Daly's hand stretched for Chuck's wrist, the safe version of a grab he could later excuse as demonstration. The class leaned with him, the silence sharp. Chuck turned his forearm a quarter, shoulder dropping half an inch. Daly's grip dissolved, redirected with the lightest touch. His heel scraped back on the waxed floor before he knew what had happened. A ripple went through the room, Half gasp, half laugh. Phones lifted just above folders. Jenny whispered, "He didn't even," then stopped. Daly's face burned red. "That's a trick," he snapped. Words too quick, meant for the kids, but aimed at his own nerves. "It's not a trick," Chuck said evenly. "It's control." No one laughed now. The room wasn't in the mood for comedy, it wanted judgment. Daly lunged again, trying for a wrist and shoulder grip. Chuck moved just enough, redirecting with 2 fingers, and the teacher ended up facing the windows instead of his class. His shoe slapped the tile to catch balance. The sound was too loud, and several kids winced. Chuck stood calm, still in the same square of linoleum. "You said no theatrics. I'm keeping it simple." Daly's chest heaved. "If you have power, use it. Otherwise, it's choreography." Cruz muttered, "Man," but didn't sound amused anymore. Daly lunged harder, aiming to wrap Chuck's ribs and drive him back. Chuck stepped in, not away. A forearm slid between, ribs turned slightly, and Daly's momentum hit nothing. He staggered sideways, bumping a desk. Jenny's chair screeched back, but she didn't flinch. That was when the room erupted. Phones high now, flashes stuttering, voices half-shouted. The noise didn't sound like a classroom anymore. It sounded like a crowd. Daly's face went pale beneath the flush. "That's not fair," he barked, and the kids recognized the desperation. "Fair?" Chuck said quietly. "This is safer than fair." Daly jabbed a finger at him. "Then stop dodging. Stand still. I am standing still." It was true. The class knew it. That was the worst part. Papers spilled from Daly's desk as he tried to gesture, handouts sliding to the floor. He didn't pick them up. "You're afraid," he barked, but the line broke halfway into a laugh. "No," Chuck said, calm as ever. "I'm giving you a way out." The line hit the room like a verdict. 3 kids exhaled at once. Jenny's grip on her desk tightened. Eli sat frozen, jaw locked. Daly's pride snapped. He surged again, hands wide, body leaning forward in a rush. Chuck didn't resist, didn't counter with force. He only turned a rib, lifted a hand into the path like a door quietly shutting. Daly's momentum drained into stillness, leaving him a step too close, chest open. The teacher's voice cracked. "Hit me! If it's real, hit me!" The demand split the room. Half the kids gasped, half froze. Phones trembled in hands. Chuck stayed still, hand lowered. "You don't want that." "I do!" Daly shouted. "Prove it!" His arms spread wide, inviting it. "Show them!" The class ceased being a class. It became witnesses. Even the ticking clock seemed to stop. Chuck's eyes went to Eli. The boy's fists clenched on the seat, knuckles pale. Their look held, silent, heavy. Chuck exhaled, slow, steady. "Last chance," he told Daly. "Do it!" Daly barked, voice ragged, dragging the word into the silence. And then Chuck stepped forward, not rushing, not hesitating, just closing the space. His hand began to rise, calm and precise. Every breath in the room hitched. Jenny's lips parted. Cruz lowered his phone without realizing, and just as the room braced for impact, the back door clicked open. A hinge groaned, and the principal's silhouette filled the doorway. Nobody turned. All eyes stayed locked on the space between the 2 men, on the moment balanced between spectacle and judgment. The principal's silhouette filled the doorway, but nobody moved. The room had already become something else, no longer a class, but a ring. Papers lay scattered like snowdrifts at Daly's shoes. The flag by the window stirred against its pole, and 100 small faces stared into the narrow gap between 2 men. Daly didn't turn. His voice scraped out raw. "Do it!" Hit Me Chuck's hand continued its path upward, steady as a clock hand. His palm stayed open, no fist, no threat. He stepped forward with measured certainty, the kind that makes the floorboards seem to agree with every footfall. For one suspended second, every breath in the room braced for the sound of impact. It never came. His hand stopped an inch from Daly's chest. The stillness was louder than any strike. Students gasped together, the kind of sound you only hear when the blow doesn't land. Even the fluorescent buzz seemed to pause. Daly's shoulders, already braced, twitched under the weight of fear that had nowhere to go. Chuck rotated his palm and set it lightly against Daly's shoulder. The touch was nothing, a feather on fabric, but the message carried through every desk and every phone camera. "No," he said, "we're done." Daly's face flushed, then drained all at once. He tried to gather authority back into his frame, but it clung to him like a wet shirt. His hands hovered uselessly, fingers trembling. Chuck's voice didn't rise. Real strength isn't about proving you can win. It's knowing you don't need to. The words weren't dressed as a speech. They were offered plain, and that made them heavier. Daly sagged a half-inch, as if the floor had tilted beneath him. Chuck turned toward the students, his eyes sweeping the rows. "You don't teach by breaking someone smaller. You teach by lifting him, so both learn where the ground is." He placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. The boy stiffened first, then straightened, his chin high. "I'm proud of you." Spoken for one, but it carried to the back wall. The silence broke when someone clapped. Too sharp, too soon, but it triggered the rest. Applause spread like a fire across dry grass. Jenny shot to her feet, eyes wet, clapping until her palms burned. Cruz followed. No grin now, just raw awe. Even kids who had laughed the day before joined, swept by the force of the moment. Phones tilted high, capturing the sound of desks rattling under the rhythm of hands. It wasn't celebration. It was recognition, a collective verdict. The principal, caught between duty and spectacle, clapped too. His voice cracked when he tried to take control. "All right, that's enough." Nobody listened until Chuck, with one simple gesture, setting his cap back on his head, quieted the room in a way the principal never could. He nodded once. "They've got class to finish. You'll take it from here." The principal stammered, Yes, of course." Relief and helplessness tangled in his throat. Chuck turned to Eli. "Walk me to the door." Together they moved down the aisle. Desks shifted back, students leaning away instinctively, not from fear, but from respect. Cruz muttered, "Sorry," though he didn't know to whom. Jenny watched Eli with something like pride, a smile trembling under tears. At the doorway, Chuck paused, looking back once. His gaze passed over the class, then rested briefly on Daly, who was still crouched, stacking papers with unsteady hands. "Teach them to stand up," he said softly, "so you don't have to stand over them." No one dared breathe until he and Eli stepped into the hall and the door closed with a sigh. The silence after felt brittle. Then chairs scraped. Jenny wiped her eyes with her sleeve. The principal tried again, this time steadier. "Phones away." Miraculously, the phones disappeared. Daly rose slowly, squaring his messy stack of worksheets. His voice had shrunk. "Homework," he said, eyes on the page he held. "One page, someone you respect, and why. Pick someone you actually know." No laughter followed, just a ripple of uneasy acknowledgement. Outside, near the trophy case, sunlight stretched across the tiles. The old team photos reflected the boy and the man walking side by side. Chuck adjusted his cap. "You all right?" Eli nodded. His voice barely made it out. "Yeah. You did the hard part," Chuck said. "I didn't do anything." "You stood," Chuck replied. "Most days, that's the hardest thing." They walked on together. The hall smelled faintly of floor wax and pencil shavings, ordinary scents that felt charged now, like the air after lightning. Teachers peered from doorways, unsure if they had witnessed history or rumor. A janitor leaned on his mop and lowered his eyes, as though sensing this moment wasn't his to claim. By the time the school spilled into the Texas heat, the video had already traveled from pocket to pocket. the raised hand that never struck, the words about strength, the silence heavier than violence. Stories would twist, exaggerate, fade, but those who had been there would always remember what truly happened. The blow withheld, the dignity restored. That evening, in kitchens across town, parents would hear fragments from their kids about a teacher humbled, about a legend who came without fanfare, about a boy who stood tall when it mattered. Some parents would doubt. Others would pull the video from their children's phones and watch twice, 3 times, unsettled by the way silence could weigh more than force. And Eli, sitting at his own kitchen table, would answer his mother's casual question, "How was school?" with one word, "Good." This time, it wasn't a shield. It was the truth. The day ended not with cheers, but with the bell. For once, it felt like it rang for the right reason.